Way to go. Here we go. So thank you again for joining. I'm Mike Shannon, founder of TriFit Business Development. And I did not put my introductory slides into today's presentation. Several of you have heard them already, so rather than repeat myself, but I can just tell you that I fell into teaching sales in the insurance industry in 2008. I had a client that hired me, even though I didn't know what an underwriter was, to teach his underwriters to take responsibility for their production results. And 9 months later, he said, "I'll be darned, it worked, but I'm not sure it'll stick." You have to know this guy to love him. And a year and a half later, he said, "I'll be darned, they're still doing what you taught them." He happened to be the founder of Target Markets Program Administrators Association, if you're familiar with Target Markets, which is an offshoot from AAMGA, focused on program administrators. And I started going to their conferences and discovered this opportunity to teach sales to non-sales professionals, specifically in the insurance industry, that go by the title of underwriter. Production underwriter typically is what they're called. So anyway, that's what I've been doing for the last 12, 13 years. And my clients include managing general agencies, program administrators, a little bit of work with carriers. I trained over 100 underwriters for star companies in the past year, clients around the country, and even a little bit of work with some retailers. So if you're not managing an underwriting organization, that's okay. These concepts that I'm teaching were all developed for full-time sales organizations as opposed to underwriting organizations. I've been interpreting it for them. So here we go with just some logistics things. Obviously everybody's muted to start out. Still the case. I took the polls out of this one, so apologize for that. We'll have a survey at the end, one takeaway from today. If you would just take a minute, fill that out for me, that'd be awesome. You can raise your hand and hopefully I'll see it, or put a question in. Yeah, that's obviously not formatted properly, but put your questions in there. I've learned that I can undock the questions field and keep it separate, so hopefully I can see that a little bit easier than I was seeing in the past. And then the big issue is if the webinar broadcast stops. So if that happens, please just bear with me. It'll come back typically in 30 to 60 seconds. So when I ask people to sign up, I say, what do you hope to get from today? And there were several duplicates. Motivation and coaching techniques were a couple of those, but tips on managing production organization. That's what this whole series is about. This one, I'm going to give the person who wrote this a phone call today and say, hey, the chasm between brokers and underwriters' expectations. And I'm very cognizant of that. I've had a lot of conversations. I've actually had a lot of people tell me recently that brokers, really, these retail agents, don't understand insurance. They really, they can't follow it when you try to explain coverages, and that's just frightening. That's why E&O exists, I guess, errors and omissions insurance. So, but I know that brokers, I summarize it by brokers think underwriters know one word. It's N-O. Underwriters think that all brokers are liars. So the movie Liar, Liar, I have a slide about that. So there is a chasm, absolutely, but I'd like to understand more and how good leadership is going to help that person with this, dealing with that chasm. So I like to quote famous people, and Bump Ellis, was a big football coach. And how do you win? Getting your average players to play good and good to play great. And that sounds like a pretty good recipe. You can get people to exceed their natural ability. And this is a duplicate from something I showed last week, Tom Landry. But really, you are all in leadership positions. And the challenge for any good leader, any good coach, is to get people to do what they don't want to do so that they can have what they have. So I've been thinking about this for the last 24 hours or so, and the thought occurred to me this morning that, I don't know if you remember or seen these ads, nothing says I love you like flowers is the one that I thought of. I asked my lovely wife who's listening in to make sure the technology goes well. She said diamonds. I'm like, oh crap, there's a difference between the two of us. Made me chuckle, and I'm probably making a few of you chuckle right now. But so I was able to find this graphic. It's an advertisement from a jewelry shop. But I really think that nothing says I love you to a staff person more than coaching. Coaching is a huge differentiator. And in terms of people's motivation, people's performance, your relationship with them, I think I'm going to write a LinkedIn post about that. Nothing says I love you more than coaching, because I believe that's true. But I wanted to kind of challenge each of you today a little bit with this concept. And I talk about this in my responsibility class, where I'm just encouraging people to take more responsibility, stop making excuses. And it's something called the Peter Principle. And so if you're in your career, if you went to college and got a risk management degree, awesome. You were smarter than a lot of people, me included. But if you didn't, somehow you stumbled into this industry. And what you discovered is that, boy, there's a lot of opportunity here, and there's a lot of job security. Even now, I know it's a little tenuous perhaps, with submissions being down, contractors aren't starting like they should in the springtime, and restaurants are closed. And we just got a notice this morning, our car insurance folks are offering a 15% discount for the next 3 months. And it's kind of ironic, because I asked my agent, hey, what are they doing? And she goes, well, there's payment, flexibility. If you need help with that, they'll let you defer payment or whatever. I'm like, no, we don't need that, but we're not driving, so shouldn't we get a discount from that? And sure enough, this morning she came in and found an email from our carrier, 15% off for 3 months, and you don't have to do anything. We'll just adjust the automatic payments in our case. So cool, but I digress. You started out maybe as a processor, and then you became an assistant underwriter, and then underwriter, and then as you do a really good job, you get promoted. But now you're in a leadership position, and what's your responsibility now? And I would offer that a critical part of your responsibility is to develop your replacement. As you think about it, if you underwrite well, you get promoted into maybe an underwriting supervisor. And now you're managing people. And if you do a really good job at managing the people, you would ultimately be promoted, hopefully internally, but whatever, to a position of managing managers. So, that might be a director level or maybe a VP level. So your ability to coach and develop your team determines your ultimate career opportunity as well. The Peter Principle is that people get promoted basically to their level of mediocrity. And by that, if you think about it, well, okay, so the world's run by a lot of people who are mediocre at what they do, and it's clearly not true. But for your own personal career, I think it's a powerful tool to be able to develop people. And like I said, I think it's critical. In fact, I could, maybe if I have time at the end, I'll tell a story or two about clients of mine who've changed what they do. So what is coaching? It's improving their ability, and it's not doing the problem or taking care of it yourself. And this Jeff Weiner, CEO of LinkedIn, it's a lot. Problem solving is easy. Coaching takes a lot of energy. You need to understand the person and what they're all about. And Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. You can be efficient with things, but you can't have an efficient dealing with people. People just don't work that way. He said, try and imagine being efficient in a marriage. So I think it's really critical, and coaching is a huge component of this. So for you personally, you should be just constantly learning. So you're getting a little bit of training now, and maybe you'll try and implement some of that training But then over time, you get busy with the crush of everything else and you fall away. And so, you kind of go back to that steady state. You're a little bit more better, a little bit more idea what you should be doing. So now maybe you do some more training, or you refresh this course or what have you. You read a book, you follow a blog, and you get a little bit better, and then the cycle repeats. And so taking on the persona of a lifetime learner, I think is really important. And if you get nothing else out of today, I'd encourage you to do that, because you're not going to remember a ton of what I say today. That's the reality of education. But if you just take on the body language of somebody that's always listening to books or podcasts about leadership or whatever, ultimately you'll achieve more growth in your career. And that's, your goal with your team as well. So, where are you today? What are your coaching skills today? And this is not a pitch for this product, but it kind of is, because Objective Management Group developed a sales DNA assessment. I need to change the slide. It was 1990, so it's 3 decades of research and development. Close to 2 million people have been through it. And it's a sales DNA assessment. And the purpose of this primarily is to help develop people. And I went through this assessment in 2007 and didn't do particularly well, and was in complete denial with what it said until I had a validation experience and realized that it was spot on. Things that had plagued me or undermined my effectiveness for 25-year career in sales that I was clueless about. In fact, it was 27 years at that point. And that, epiphany that occurred for me is why I started using this thing. And it's been voted the top assessment tool in the world, sales assessment, for 9 years running. It's amazing. But we have a version for sales managers as well as sales people. So your first line producers, and then your first line supervisors over them. And then there's another level for managers. And we're evaluating, I don't know, it's just a dozen different skills that you either have or don't have. And obviously, an red X is not good, or green check is, hey, that's good. And one of the interesting things that I just wanted to mention today is, do you rescue your team? Now, our knee-jerk reaction is to want to be the savior, to want to ride in on our white horse and save the day or whatever. But if you do that enough, your team depends on you for that. It's the concept of the monkey's on their back. Now they're putting the monkey on your back. And we say no to anybody else's monkeys. We don't want them. So what you've got to do is develop the posture of letting them fail. And here's why. Unsuccessful people, if they have a lot of failures, it kind of beats them down, and they end up, not moving forward, not trying to do anything new or to learn. Successful people use their failures as stepping stones to improve themselves. And one of my favorite stories about this is the gal that developed Spanx. She's the first female self-made billionaire in the world, apparently. So pretty popular product, I guess. Wouldn't know, but she tells a story how her father, once a week or so, would ask her and her brother, so what did you fail at this week? Huh? What do you mean, Dad? Well, if you didn't fail at anything, you're not trying anything new. So what did you fail at? And if you heard that, after 3, 4, 5 weeks, you're like radars up all week long. What can I try that would be new, something new? And you're pushing yourself to learn and grow the whole time. So this structure that I'm going to lay out here, it's coaching structure. It's really designed to as a pattern or a methodology for you to implement. And I'll tell you right up front, the last slide is the hardest part is to start. But I'll tell one of my stories. One of my most successful clients, I actually referenced them. I can't remember if I showed you last week or not, but we got some new people anyway. was the manager of a production underwriting group working under Amwins, and he, his team embraced the stuff that I taught, and he led them really, really well. He held them accountable. Last week's subject to prospecting every day, and I did tell that story if you happen to be part of that presentation. And Keith, would report back to them their numbers. And my favorite email that he shared with me is the hunt for Rev October, not red, but revenue October. And it was a little play on words in that famous movie and book, but Keith was just always trying to, pour into his team, send him inspirational stuff. And so one of my clients wanted to know more about this. So they asked if we could set up a call with him. So at one of my coaching sessions with a client, we got Keith on the phone, and the president of my client said, "Keith, what changed in your job?" And he said, "Mike, or Brian's the guy's name." He said, "I'll tell you, I used to spend maybe 10% of my time coaching my team, and the rest of the time I was solving problems. I was doing the work." He said, "I'm now coaching at least 50% of my day. My job is to help my team do the work so that they learn and I don't have to do it, so I can go develop the next person." And I'll never forget that, because that's exactly what we're talking about. Constantly coaching your team. So how do you do it? It's got to be in person, ideally face to face. With Zoom, everybody's using Zoom these days. That's certainly a good medium. You got FaceTime on your iPhone or whatever. And it's all about the questions that you ask, and we're going to dig deeper into that. So, here's a couple of good getting started questions. Hey, how'd you rate yourself in that last, conversation you had with the broker about that submission? Why'd you give yourself that? And what could you have done better? I mean, simple little questions, okay? But we're going to talk about the structure of how you would use that. So going into a coaching session, you don't want to just wing it. You've got to be prepared, as do they, because what we want to be doing is what we call PreCall planning or briefing and a post-call debrief. So the pre-call plan is along the lines of a specific account that you've received, and that they have in the house, I would say, and what is the goal of that conversation? When you call that broker, what are you trying to accomplish? And that submission, that have you learned why the broker would fire the incumbent carrier and why the insured would agree to do that? Why would they change? If there's no reason to change, they're probably not going to. And everybody's been rolled by the brokers that just spreadsheet the world and, get all a bunch of submissions and then go with who they're going to go with anyway. That's the one they're going to recommend, regardless of whether it's more expensive or whatever. So brokers are actually the decision makers. Everybody pushes back and argues with me with that, but it's rare that an insured goes against what a broker recommends. So, all as part of this pre-call thing where, what might happen, what could derail it, what's a good outcome, that sort of stuff. And then what does that conversation sound like? And, maybe we can just do a little role play of that. This point about the sales DNA gets back to the OMG assessment, Objective Management Group, as we affectionately call it. They name it today, they'd call it something different. Texting didn't exist back in 1990. Is your sales DNA, and I'll explain that in more detail here in a moment, is that going to get in the way of you being, executing on this call? The post-call debrief, okay? So you quoted an account, you didn't get it, the X date came and went, you never even heard from the broker, hey, how did all that turn out? And this is the staff person decides what accounts they want to talk about. Now, obviously, it's a big one. Everybody knows that's the one we want to talk about. But, why did it go the way that it did? What could you have done differently? Might you have been responsible for that outcome? And, was that deficiency something that has to do with your wiring? And then possibly, implement a role play again here. So that's the, every week, we should be talking about specific accounts while you're looking at their OMG assessment, knowing that their qualification skills are pretty weak, or their consultative selling skills are weak, or their sales DNA is getting in the way. I've got these questions, deeper dive questions, as a list of 10 questions in the handouts. So again, I'd encourage you to download those now while I'm talking, because you should be able to find them right in the control panel, because I think it'd be helpful for you to, keep that one handy. Talking about sales DNA, there are times when we observe our team doing something that we think they should know what to do. They should know how to do it, but they didn't execute it. So the question is, did you not do it because you didn't know you should have done it, or you were uncomfortable? And so we break that into two, scenarios. One that we call technical. They didn't know they were supposed to do that, even though you've taught them before. But if people remember 10% of what you're trying to teach them, that's a good win. Or they knew what they were supposed to do, but gosh jolly, they just couldn't muster up the courage to do it. So it might sound like, how the conversation go regarding why the insured will change carriers, and the staffers, hey, I didn't ask them that. So didn't you ask them that because you didn't know you were supposed to find out why they would change carriers, or because you were uncomfortable? And that discomfort is a term we call need for approval. It's one of the underlying conditions that I've had my whole life and never knew about it until I took this sales assessment 13 years ago, 14 now, I guess. This is just a screenshot that talks about the 6 underlying conditions that get in people's way. We all have records that play in our heads. There's 45 of them that we actually evaluate for. One of those is that people are honest. People are honest until they put on a buyer's hat, and then they lie like a rug. I don't know why that is. I have some theories, but need for approval, I just mentioned, that's a desire to be liked. And what we do is coach people, hey, replace your desire to be liked with a desire to be respected. Getting emotional. In my book, Hooked on Hopium, there's a chapter, hey, no point in being Irish if you're not emotional. Well, it sounds funny, but the reality is, when I get emotional in a sales situation, I lose focus on what I'm, there to accomplish and what the client's telling me, and that becomes, an issue, because I lose my objectivity. I'm uncomfortable talking about money. I don't know how you were raised, but I heard money doesn't grow on trees, and it's the root of all evil, and yada yada yada. I'm like, yeah, people that tell you that's because they don't have any. But there is a lot of truth to that. But you've got to obviously be comfortable. Now, talking about selling rate increases, that's a big factor there. And then how you purchase things in your personal life affects the way that you sell as well. So, if you're a price shopper and you spend a long time making decisions, and your broker says, well, we got to get, multiple quotes. If you're a price shopper and take a long time, say, hey, when can I follow up? Somebody that doesn't do that say, well, that's not the way I buy stuff. When I decide I want something and I find a good source and I like the person, I just buy it. And so that's kind of the approach that you should take. And we get a lot of pushback on that one, so don't worry about it if you're thinking, oh, that's crazy, why wouldn't I price shop the internet and all that stuff. And then dealing with rejection. So your job is to understand these conditions so that you can help coach your team to be more effective. This is a screenshot from the sales assessment for each individual. So pretty much on one page, here's their strengths, here's the weaknesses or the DNA issues, here's their skills, and even tell you how coachable they are. And if you got a low score there, then you're gonna have somebody that feels like they don't need any help. And that might be somebody that, if they're not getting it done and they don't want to help, then they might need to find another role. But this is the big one here. To me, this is the secret sauce of this assessment. And just a quick, I guess, pitch. When I worked with star companies last year, the average underwriter's sales DNA or sales percentile, which is a comparison to the 2 million people who can throw it, was 17%. And at the end of the 6-month program, it was 37%. That's an average of across 60 people in this case. So I know that this program works and can have a major impact on people's outcomes and their ability to execute. How do you know if you're effectively coaching? Kind of wrapping up. Hey, they're asking for help. They're looking for you. They look forward to those one-on-one sessions. So it can't be a bashing session. The meetings will continue until morale improves. No, that is not exactly positive, and that's not what we're looking for. If you see changes, if your team this month is better than they were a month ago, in the aggregate, you're coaching effectively. And if you see their performance, their success rate is starting to improve. The underwriters that Keith was managing, their hit rate went from 25 to 46%. That's pretty significant improvement. And most underwriters, after some period of time, are pretty good at the underwriting piece, but are they really good at the sales production piece? So I am going to, let me check my time here. Oh, I got a couple minutes left, but not much time. So Dave Curlin is the founder of Objective Management Group, and he wrote a blog that these items came out of. And I am going to stop now, and I am going to show if this works. A video clip, and it's Dave Curlin at a seminar. It's only a minute and a half long, and I'm getting a scrolling circle on my screen. That's the bad news. The good news is there's a resource handout that I included in there. And yeah, I think I'm just going to kill this. It's a YouTube link that I put out there. And I'm going back to showing my screen. Hopefully you can see the slides again. That didn't work the other day when I tried to do it. So kind of summarize, and this I repeated myself here. The hardest part, I meant to quote an email I got from somebody yesterday. I've been reading books about this, and I'm not any good at it. And I don't know, it's because I'm not practicing enough or whatever. And my email back says, hey, the hardest part is to start it. Minimum weekly. Why is that? How often do you want to tell your wife you love her, or your spouse, or whatever, your significant other, partner, whatever, your children? You want to tell them all the time, and actions speak louder than words, and pouring into them, giving them your best in terms of a coach is the way to show them, truly how much you care about them and their success. And guess what? It's going to determine how far you actually get in your career as well. So, it's it's just something you schedule and in person. And I strongly encourage you to keep notes when I do coaching one-on-one. I've got a file with notes. I just handwrite the notes out. There's some in the handout section. I included something from a guy named Keith Rosen, who wrote a book that I reference also, and it's a PreCall prep form, and it is like way over the top, in my opinion. So I wouldn't expect you to necessarily follow the whole thing. You drive yourself and them crazy probably, but this course is conceptual. Take the pieces out of it that are relevant to you and your situation. So that handout is in there. Here's the coaching resources, the coaching questions. Again, this is Brian Hearn. I referenced him last week, and I'm just about finished his book, Influence People, and it's pretty compelling because we're constantly desiring to influence, persuade people. And the more you can get people to say yes, in both your personal and professional life, personal life. If you're people you're living with, your children, whatever, are saying yes to you, there's a lot of psychology behind how to get them to do that. And I mentioned Keith's latest book here. I think he's got 2 or 3 of them out, which I listened to last year. And then Dave Curlin's video. So this is a Word doc, so you should be able to just click on the link right in the, it should download that handout. So that's it. I'll pull in the questions screen up here. Are there any questions? And you can just go ahead and type in that. I'll also unleg the chat screen if somebody wants to put it in there, but I'm not seeing any questions. And unless somebody wants to throw something at me. So, okay, as I end the webinar, you will get a survey, and just please take 30 seconds, type in one thing that you got out of today. It really helps me know what's important to folks. So with that, I'll wish you farewell. And next week, I forgot to put up, we're talking about motivation, which is a popular topic. And then the last session, I'm going to dig a little deeper into that sales DNA stuff. So I truly believe it's the secret sauce to human performance when it comes to production. So I'd encourage you to join us for that one as well. And with that, I'll say good day, have a good week, and stay safe.